This is The Meaningful Way. I'm your host, Luke Iorio. Hello there, Meaningful Way listeners. I want to start today by giving you a couple of numbers. 2, 14, 20, 1, 7, and 1 million. No, I'm not giving you tonight's lotto pick. You're not going to win any $1 million tonight. But these are some numbers that are going to give you an extraordinary sense of the life journey of today's guest that we're going to hear from. And as you hear some of the story, the journey, the lessons that are there as well, I want you to consider, what does this inspire you towards? What does this teach you about what's truly possible? And also focus in on, what do you feel? Connect to what you feel and what stirs inside you as you listen to the incredible adventures of our guest. And so with that, I guess I better get back to those numbers and reveal what that's all about. You see, our guest today is Sean Swarner. Sean has beaten 2 deadly forms of cancer twice in his life. He has been given the prognosis of having just 14 days to live. This was all before the age of 20. And during this time, they needed to remove one of Sean's lung. And he used his one remaining lung to not only climb Mount Everest, but all of the 7 summits and even explore Antarctica. Sean is a nationally recognized speaker. He's actually been recognized as one of the most inspirational speakers in the world. He's an adventurer, as you've pretty much heard already. He's an elite athlete. He's competed in competitions like the Hawaii Ironman. And he's also an author, and he is now even adding performance coaching to his repertoire and resume due to a great coach training school, if I might add. And so as to that 1 million number, that one I'm going to make you wait on for just a little bit, because Sean will talk more about that as we get there in this interview. And so with that, Sean, I want to welcome you and thank you for being on The Meaningful Way.
Luke, man, that was awesome. I'm sitting here going, well, I want to know what those numbers are for. And for anybody who's listening, no, we're not giving away $1 million. So,
yeah, I thought, it's funny because when I reflect on your story, and it was something that just kind of came to me as we were preparing for the interview today, of just these extraordinary numbers and the way that they lay out just this amazing journey. And it's interesting because normally the first question I would go into is to ask you about, what was life like before, meaning before the turning point, before you discovered the direction you wanted to head in. But the story starts so early for you. And I guess maybe that's where we should begin is, how young were you when you first heard the dreaded diagnosis for the first time, and what were those 5, 6, 7 years kind of all about for you?
It's kind of interesting going back, because I remember, everybody has like their earliest memories. Everybody has some things that they hold on to. Mine is being by a pool and my dad coming up. And this was, I think it was, in St. Croix when I was a little kid on the United States Virgin Islands. And I remember sitting by the pool and having him bring this lobster that he caught when he was out, I don't know, trapping or whatever they do to catch lobster. I don't know. I live in Colorado, which is a landlocked state, so I have no idea. But I remember being this little kid and this monster coming up from the sea depths, because I was sitting by the pool, and it scared the living you-know-what out of me. And that was one of my first memories. So going back, so far and so long ago, I think I must have been, 2 years old, maybe 3 years old. And then from there on, I had a wonderful childhood. Everything was normal. I was your typical Midwest kid who had his sights set on, going in the backyard and building a fort. Except my fort was underground, and I remember digging underground and trying to chop through this thing because I had a hole basically in my backyard, but far enough into the field behind our backyard that my parents didn't know what I was doing. But my dad, I didn't know this until later, but my dad was sitting there watching TV, and he was seeing his young kid go to the shed where we had all the tools and everything. And, long story short, he saw me walk by and grab a shovel and then disappear. Come back 15, 20 minutes later and get a spade shovel, which is designed to hack into roots. And he saw his kid grab the spade shovel and head back. And then all of a sudden he sees his kid, probably he was 6 or 7 years old, grab an axe. One of those, like the axe handle was probably bigger than I was, or taller than I was. And at that point, my dad's probably thinking, what the hell's my kid doing? What's he getting into? And in my mind, I had a goal. I was digging a hole. I wanted to get this thing out of my hole, and it was just like this black tube that I kept chipping away at. And as I was hoisting up this axe to chop down onto this tube, my dad shows up. He's like, in the typical father sense, he's like, "Boy, what are you doing?" And I look at him thinking it's some trick question, and I'm like, well, doesn't he see I'm digging a hole here? So I'm like, I'm digging a hole, Dad. What do you think I'm doing? He's like, no, what are you trying to get rid of here? Because in my mind, I had one goal. I wanted to dig a hole, and that thing was in my hole, and I wanted to get out. Mm-hmm. And he pointed at it and said, follow that tube down that way, pointed with his arm extending out. He's like, what do you see? And I was like, nothing. He's like, keep looking. And I looked a little further, and I was like, oh, it's a power plant. And I was like, oh, that's a power plant. I was about ready to hack into my city's grid system, basically, and electrocute myself. So I grew up, in Midwest Ohio, where I had some interesting adventures, and I was just, digging holes in the backyard, running around, playing hide and seek, and we used to play Ghost in the Graveyard with other kids in the neighborhood, and had a great time until when I was 13. My whole perspective, my whole life changed. Essentially, I was playing basketball. My knee snapped when I was playing basketball, and all of a sudden, hey, as a 13-year-old, now I'm not battling pneumonia, which they initially thought it was. I'm now battling cancer. Mm. And I remember my mom and dad being called into the hallway, and the general practitioner just asked my mom and dad point blank, "Do you know of any oncologists?" And boom, there it is. There's that O word that no one ever wants to hear. Yeah. And I was born and raised in a small town, about 5,000 people, called Willard, Ohio. And they didn't have the treatments to take care of somebody who's going through cancer, so they took me to Columbus, Ohio. And eventually I was diagnosed as a 13-year-old with advanced stage 4 Hodgkin's lymphoma, and they pretty much gave me only 3 months to live. Wow.
It's and then you find your way through the first fight. Because you battled this first diagnosis for a couple of years, only to bring it. Was it full remission when you got diagnosed a second time?
I was in complete remission when I was going in for a checkup for the first cancer. They found a second cancer, and the first one was a primary cancer. The second one was a primary cancer too. So oftentimes people, when they get treatment or whatever it might be, the secondary cancer is because of the treatments from the first cancer. And right. I was actually diagnosed with 2 separate primary cancers. And, I wasn't exactly going for this goal, but I'm the only person who's ever had Hodgkin's and Askins sarcoma. And it was just unbelievable, because this is I was 16 at this time, and I was just going in for a checkup for the first cancer. They found a tumor on an X-ray. They did a needle biopsy. They took out a lymph node in my neck. They put in a Hickman catheter, which is like a permanent IV in my chest. They cracked open my ribs, took out the tumor, put in a drainage tube, and started chemotherapy in less than 24 hours. That's how bad it was.
Wow. And so you get through this experience. When did you go into remission the second time?
The second time I was in treatment so I went in for 3 months of intense chemo, a month of radiation therapy, which, by the way, I only have one functioning lung because of that. Mm-hmm. And then I went into 10 more months of chemo. And I remember when I was first diagnosed with the second cancer, a man of the cloth came in, and he was reading me my last rites. And I remember looking at the end of the bed, and there he was going ashes to ashes, dust to dust. And I just kind of looked at it, and I was like, "Dude, I'm not dead yet. Leave. I'm not ready to go." And it kind of reminded me of the I don't know if you've seen Monty Python Meaning of Life, but there's a beginning scene where they show up and they're like, "Bring out your dead," and they toss an old man on the cart, and because of the Black Plague, the guy's like, "I'm not dead yet," and he responds, "But you will be soon." I was like, "Dude, I'm not dead yet. Not time to go." But that time around, they gave me 14 days to live, like I said, and we'll just say a year and a half later, thanks to the miracle of modern medicine, family support, prayer, and just an inner will to move on with my life, I eventually walked out of the hospital as a normal, if there is anything, normal teenager.
Unbelievable. So you're now, give or take, about 18 years of age. You're in full remission for the second time, and you're now told, okay, you can go about your life now. So how do you, at that point, how do you begin to readjust? And I guess maybe what we can tie it to, I mentioned at the opening, how do you go from readjusting to life at that age, and then however many years later, because it wasn't that too far in the future, you turn around and go, hey, I've got this idea. I think I'm going to climb Mount Everest with one lung. So take me through that part of the journey.
Now that you mentioned it, I'm looking back at my life, just thinking to myself, what the hell was I thinking? Like, what? My parents got me through 2 cancers, and I was going to go kill myself on a hunk of rock and ice. No, going back to your point with being put in remission, it was crazy because we'll just lump it together. Say for 3 or 4 years of my life, I was fighting for my life. There were nights I would fall asleep and not even know if I was going to wake up the next morning. So all of a sudden, my future literally is the next day, the next breath sometimes. And the doctor says, "Oh, by the way, hey, in remission, go have fun." And everybody who's around me, my brother, my mom, my dad, my family members, friends, relatives, everybody is super happy. And I'm sitting there going, well, now what do I do?
Right.
That was my life for such a long time. What do I do? So I went to college and relived my high school years and turned into Belushi from Animal House. I had a great time. Went to grad school and started to work on my master's and my doctorate because I wanted to be a psychologist for cancer patients. And it hit me. I had gone through all this stuff kind of with my eyes closed, to be honest with you. I was just putting one foot in front of the other, but I also realized at that point, going through anything traumatic, my 2 cancers, it changes who you are if you let it. And you have a choice of changing it for the good or for the bad. I know so many people who've gone through cancer and they're bitter. The first question everybody always has is, why me, why me, why me? But the fact of the matter is, it is you. Asking that question isn't going to change the facts, isn't going to change how you see things. So I did that. I took a look in the mirror and I realized that I had my own baggage. I didn't deal with my own cancer. How can I help other people if I haven't even helped myself? So I took a sabbatical from the studies, and I wanted to go out and prove to myself that I was alive. Yeah. Or maybe I wanted to use the 29,000-foot platform to scream hope, or maybe I wanted to do both. So maybe I wanted to really change the lives and help people who've been touched by cancer, because it's now, I'm dubbing it a global epidemic. Yeah. It seems like it's everywhere. Yeah. And I wanted to prove to people, hey, that you really can do what you put your mind to. And if a guy who was once given 3 months to live, 14 days to live, can climb Mount Everest with one functioning lung, it's anything really is possible.
Yeah. So how does it then continue? Because it didn't stop there. You climb Everest, you conquer this extraordinary feat, given everything that you've been through, one functioning lung, let alone just the achievement that Everest is without those obstacles. And then you say, hey, I've got an idea. Let me go climb 6 more mountains. Let me go to Antarctica. And you kind of keep going. And I'm just curious, what was it that created that persistence, that fire to keep going and doing all these other expeditions and adventures?
I think it was the fact that everywhere I go, I visit cancer hospitals, and I visit patients in the hospital, be it, on vacation even, or for a presentation, keynote talk or whatever it might be. And I think I wanted to reach around the world and literally use those mountains as a metaphor for climbing life, and I have this analogy of a circle of hope, where when I'm climbing, I get my inspiration from the people who are battling for their lives, which are, at the bottom of the circle. And when I come back, I share my survivorship story with those patients. But the huge difference is, if I'm up on the mountain and something turns bad, I can always turn around.
Yeah.
People who are fighting for their lives, they don't have that opportunity. Yes, they basically have two choices, and this is how I saw it too: fight for my life or give up and die. And it's not really a choice. Being in the mountains, when you're climbing and going into these extreme altitudes and battling hurricane force winds and minus 60-degree temperatures, that's a choice. I put myself there God, it sounds awful to say. I put myself in 80 degree below temperatures on purpose.
Right.
But these people who are battling cancer, they don't have a choice. They have to go through it.
Yeah.
So I think I get my inspiration from those guys and people who are fighting for their lives. But I wanted to reach around the world and really make a difference.
Yeah. There was something that you said a little while ago about how when you go through cancer, that one way or the other, it's going to change who you are. And you've got some choice as to how you evolve through that process. And I'm curious if you could say more about that process of understanding and intentionally evolving who you are, because whether it's the actually facing a diagnosis as extreme and as life-threatening as cancer, or if I were to slightly take that in a different direction and just look at the different things that we all combat in our lives. It could be the loss of a relationship, the loss of a job, it could be the death of somebody close to us. We face these extraordinary things that at times feel like they're done to us, and it is going to fundamentally change who we are at different points. And I'm curious for your perspective of how do you navigate through that evolution of discovering and finding and evolving intentionally who you are.
I think one of the greatest freedoms that we have is the freedom of choice, because we can always choose to do something or not do something. By not doing something, you're still making a choice. And I know going through the cancers, coming out on the other side, I had a choice to either see it as a good thing or a bad thing. And I don't understand why I would want to see it as a bad thing. Yes, I was embarrassed, and quick aside, the American Cancer Society has this Relay for Life event where they walk around a track, and the first lap is actually for cancer survivors. And even in my hometown, when I came back from college, I didn't do the first lap. I don't know if I was embarrassed. I don't know if I just didn't want to. It's not that I wasn't in shape. It's one lap around the track and you're walking. You can crawl if you want to, but I don't know why I didn't do it. I think maybe because I just wanted to put that behind me and forget about it. Yeah. But the thing is, it's like dragging this bag along with me, or holding a glass of water straight out with my arms, just holding a glass of water straight out. And the longer I hold on to that, the heavier it gets. And I didn't want to continuously deal with the cancer as a negative thing, and I think it just kept eating at me. Because like you said, anybody who goes through anything traumatic, be it a divorce, it can be alcoholism, it can be a drug addiction, it can be a car accident, it can be tripping over the curb. It doesn't matter. You can choose how you want to see things. And I chose to look back at my life and not see it as something negative, but see it as something positive. And I wanted to fix my brain, which essentially is kind of like I'll use the analogy of a glass of water again. Pretend you have a glass of water. Positive thoughts represent clear water. Negative thoughts represent dirty water. So what happens if you have a glass of dirty water, you turn on the faucet and you constantly flush clean water through there? It's the same thing that's going to happen with your mind. The more positive you are, the more constantly you're flushing and flowing these positive thoughts through your mind, the more positive you're going to be, and that's what you're going to have left in the glass. A lot of people jokingly say, you are what you eat, but yes, you are, because on a molecular level, your cells get the nutrients, and that's how they grow from what you eat. But in all honesty, you are what you think. And you always have a choice of how you want to see something that happens to you, from, like I said, tripping over a curb to somebody cutting you off in traffic. You're driving down 80 miles an hour in the fast lane and some schmuck pulls out in front of you. You can look at that as, honking on the horn, wailing on the horn, however you want to see it. Or, you can go through life and you see things as positive influences on your life, and you always have that choice to look at things from any perspective you want.
It's one of the things that we've chatted about, because you're starting to touch on it now, and I'd like you to go further on this. One of the challenges that you've raised and that we've spoken about off air, as it were, is that in some of the talks that you do and keynotes and presentations, all these things, every once in a while an audience can sit back and go, wow, that's truly exceptional. He must be one of a kind. His situation is so foreign to where I am. I couldn't possibly do those things. And it's kind of like looking at the before and the after pictures of any type of a results thing for well-being or whatever, and people forget about what that journey must have been in between, because they're only really concentrating on the after picture. And I was wondering if you could share, especially with where you were already going with choice, if you could share a little bit about what was the journey like, what were some of the setbacks, and how did you navigate through them? It wasn't just that you were lucky enough to be extraordinary to get through this, it was that this was work. You did this. This was an intentional process you put yourself through. So if you could talk about that part of the journey as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm glad you brought that up, because so many people see the end result and they see someone who is, struggling for their life, like myself. I was bedridden for almost a year, and all of a sudden they see a guy who climbs Mount Everest. I think that's where a lot of people want to get that instant gratification from, because they see the beginning and they see the end. They don't see the hard work in between. And my first goal, I'll be honest with you, and I was going to say, between you and me and everybody else listening, my first goal literally was to go from the hospital bed to the bathroom so I wouldn't soil the sheets, or, as awful as it sounds, throw up on myself. Yeah. And because I physically could not move at one point in my life. But it was those little goals that kept pushing me forward. And in my mind, it's kind of crazy, but even as a 13-year-old, I believed in the mind-body connection. And when I was 13, I pictured myself, I did some deep breathing, made myself relax, and I visualized myself in my chemotherapy drip bag in this little micro spaceship, essentially. I don't know if you've ever done any reading with Calvin and Hobbes, the old comic strip. Yep. So Calvin, one of his alter egos was Spaceman Spiff. Yeah. And I was kind of like Spaceman Spiff, where I was in this spaceship in the IV tube, going through the clear plastic tube that was attached to my vein, like an IV. And I remember looking around in the hospital room and seeing my bed laying over to my left side. I saw the TV in front of me. I saw the window onto the right side. And all of a sudden I was thrust into my body, into my veins, and all those other little spaceships collected in the heart. And that was like the Grand Central Station. That was where we were supposed to go. And then all of a sudden we were whooshed out into the body, and I followed my GPS system on the dashboard of my spaceship to the tumor that I was supposed to kill. And when I found it, I would unload the missiles that were loaded with chemotherapy to destroy the cancer cells. So I literally pictured myself destroying the cancer cells from inside my body. And I did the same thing for going from the hospital bed to the bathroom. And a year after I was in remission, I actually won my high school's league track meet, the 800-meter run, which is a half a mile. And I did that through a lot of hard work, yes, but I also did a lot of visualization. And the more emotional attachment you can have on the end result, and the more real it is to you before you begin, you'll start living as though that goal in the present is in the future. So that's what I did. And the more real it was to me, the more real it was that it was going to happen. And I still do that with everything, even Mount Everest. So when I was visualizing Mount Everest, every night before I went to bed, I would lay down and I would fall asleep, picturing myself on the summit, hearing the crunching of the snow, smelling the ozone, feeling the sun beating my skin, feeling the wind blasting by. I pictured and used as many senses as I possibly could to make that happen.
It's amazing because you're describing a variety of things, and the big part you're highlighting is just that visualization that creates the connection to where you want things to ultimately be, and that you're bringing that connection, you're bringing that energy, that state into the present moment, which of course provides you the fuel to then do the things that you need to do to ultimately achieve it. And I think the other highlight that I really just don't want anybody to lose is just the key element of the step at a time. And so that you were engineering things in such a way that really was about progress and maintaining that progress, and through the process and the journey you were on, using some of this energy, and that ultimately was what was giving you the higher probability of having the type of success you were looking for. And it sounds like you've just applied that through all of your different adventures in a lot of different ways. It's been a part of your formula, as it were.
Oh, for sure. And for people who are out there listening, they think kind of like the book The Secret. They're just going to wish it happened. I call it the magic feather syndrome, where if you go back to Dumbo and he got that magic feather, held onto it, and he just flew. No, you have to put the work into it. Yeah. But the idea behind it is it's not going to happen unless you believe it's possible.
Yeah. So let me ask you, just before we turn to some of what you're up to today, because I do want to reveal what that 1 million number is about, but just before we get there, I'm kind of curious, because with not only your own adventures, but with all of the extraordinary people that you have met, that have inspired you, that you've connected to, and to the stories that they also uniquely have, I'm just kind of curious, what's the most surprising lesson that you've learned through your adventures and connections with all of these incredible people?
I think that's a great question. I think and just going off the top of my head, the most surprising thing I've learned, I've met some incredible people and some very, very successful people as well. And I think one of the biggest surprises is they're human beings just like us. They have self-doubt just like us. Mm-hmm. And I did a lot of thinking about it and came up with the conclusion that, who's the person you have the most conversations with throughout the day? Yourself. Mm-hmm. So, and when you have that self-talk, and I don't mean like the crazy voices in your head, we need to put a straitjacket on you, put it around the room, but the conversations that everybody has in their minds, I would guess 80% of that is negative. And then why would you be friends with somebody who's that negative? And why would you do it to yourself? Mm-hmm. So I think the people who are incredibly successful are the ones who can recognize that, stop it, and change it around. But the most surprising thing I've experienced, or the most surprising aspect of those successful people and the people that I've met are they have self-doubt too. It's ingrained there. It's built there. But the thing is, we don't have to compare ourselves to other people. We just need to compare ourselves to ourselves. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And that's I hear both of kind of both directions what you're bringing up. I hear some of these themes coming up a lot. One is it is just comparing ourselves to the best version of who we want to be, and constantly using that to strive for some of our progress. But then also being very aware of what that inner monologue is. That voice that you're talking about that we have conversations with all day long. Some of those conversations go better than others. But to be able to tune in to that inner monologue and see where it's directing us. And is as well, in terms of getting control of it, to recognize you don't have to believe everything you think. It's just part of what the brain does, is come up with thoughts. So you don't have to believe all of that. And the more you tune into your inner monologue, the more you can redirect it and take it in the direction you want to go. So I guess maybe if we... Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, for sure. Sorry, that was my microphone.
Yeah. So if we turn to today, and maybe to bring up the expedition initiative that you have launching right now, let me start with this question to feed into it: of what most inspires you and draws you forward at this point in your life? Because I know that very much ties to what the new expedition is.
Oh, for sure. It's. In April, I'm going to be completing something called the Explorers Grand Slam, And, jokingly, I still think it sounds like a Denny's breakfast platter. But, I'm going to get to the North Pole and there's going to be a side of bacon, some hash browns, and some toast waiting for me, which would be really nice if that happened. But I'm going to the North Pole in April, and it's completion of the Explorers Grand Slam, which is the highest mountain on every continent, and the North and South Poles. And I'll be the first cancer survivor to do this. If you toss in the Hawaii Ironman, I'll be the first person, period, to do this. And my personal motivation is obviously to get this done, but it's a lot deeper than that. It's to take as many people touched by cancer with me. My motivation, my hope, my inspiration, people who are battling for their lives, going through what I went through. I just want to help them understand that cancer is not a death sentence, and you can continue forward, and that there's a beautiful life after cancer. So we're collecting names to go on a flag to the North Pole. And
so the 1 million number is?
Well, my personal goal is 1 million names to get on the flag, but I know it probably sounds really overwhelming. So we're looking at initially getting 100,000 names. There's still a 1 and a bunch of zeros behind it, but I think it's very doable, and we want people to share it and just go to SeanSwarner.com/missionofhope.
Yeah. And so, we'll even be putting that URL in the show notes and up as part of getting the interview out for everybody, so you're able to see that. But it's one of the things that I found amazing was the way that you literally are looking to put the survivors on top of the world. And I know that when you and I have chatted about this, it's that really cancer has touched the faces, the cultures of everybody around the world. And that this is something now that you are bringing a mission of hope. You are bringing something very, very different to this audience. And I know that I've been inspired by the direction that you're taking. And so I guess maybe if I bring this around full circle, the name of this show is The Meaningful Way. And so if I throw that to you, what have you found to be your meaningful way? What comes to mind, Sean?
Thinking out loud, a meaningful way, meaningful life, kind of takes me back to obviously being touched by cancer a couple times and being so close to death, but realizing that we're all here on Earth for a very short period of time, relatively speaking. The dinosaurs were, 1 billion years ago or something like that, or 300 million. And, looking at how long I'm going to be here, it's that long. It's here and it's over. So I want to make a difference in the lives of people touched by cancer around the world. And I want to look back at everything I've done and realize that, I should not be worried about dying, but I just want to live a life that matters. And that life for me is to change the lives of other people, one person at a time, and help them achieve their goals, and help them achieve, their mountains, and help them have faith in themselves and humanity itself.
Well, I think the name of your current expedition, Mission of Hope, certainly says a lot about that. And it's certainly something that I know from the survivorship community to a whole lot of people out there right now. That idea of Mission of Hope is something that brings them exactly that. It brings them that hope. It brings them a different view of life and perspective on life that is very much needed right now with all that we face. So, Sean, I want to thank you for coming on The Meaningful Way. I want to thank you for sharing your story, your insights, your inspiration, and a bit of what you are up to right now to inspire and bring hope to so many.
Luke, I really appreciate that. And for anybody who has connections with Google, we're trying to reach out to those guys, because the names on the flag is going to be enormous.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a dark blue with green lettering. And with the names, we're going to spell the word hope. So it's literally the flag of hope. And if it's going to be that big, we'll be able to take a picture of it from space.
That's a phenomenal image. And for everybody, again, the link for that, I'll put this in the show notes, but SeanSwarner.com/mission of hope. Mission of Hope. And so, everybody, I want to thank you, once again for tuning into The Meaningful Way. A couple of things that stick out for me is that with this extraordinary journey that Sean has been on and everything that he's faced in his life, it still comes down to literally putting one foot in front of the other. And so whether that's some of the extraordinary adventures or even literally getting out of the hospital bed, that one foot in front of the other, the small steps lead you to just some extraordinary places. But as part of that, it is visualizing where it is that you ultimately want to be, so you can connect to that energy. You can believe in the possibility of it, something that we talk a lot about on this show. And the more that you connect to the possibility and have that energy, it will give you the fuel, the reserves, the connection to continue to draw you forward, even during some of the toughest of times. And so with that, I wish you a wonderful week of hope. And until next time, as always, enjoy the journey. Thanks for tuning in to The Meaningful Way. If you enjoyed this episode, do me a favor and please subscribe and follow along with all these great guests, their stories, and interviews. Also, it helps us a lot if you not only share some of your favorite episodes online, but also provide us feedback. Go into iTunes, Stitcher, or whatever your favorite podcast app happens to be, and rate the show. Provide us some feedback and let us know how it is that we're doing. If you want to learn more about what we're up to, whether it be with the iPEC Coach Training School, the Live, Lead, Play Network, or even just what's evolving with The Meaningful Way, go on and head on over to lukeiorio.com.